friends. You're listening to Draws in Spanish. If this is your first time listening or if you're new here, I'm your host, Fabiola. I'm an illustrator and a podcaster. And on Draws in Spanish, I chat with Latinx visual artists and designers to discuss everything from their identity and culture to their creative process and work. Something new for the show this season is that Draws in Spanish is now also available on YouTube as a video podcast. So if you want to watch us talk today instead of just listening, be sure to check out my YouTube channel at Fabiolita Draws or search for Draws in Spanish on YouTube for the latest episode. Of course, the link to my YouTube channel is in the show notes if you need it. Today, I am chatting with Mexican-American artist Marisol Muro. Marisol is an artist from Los Angeles who creates psychedelic, colorful work inspired by the 60s and 70s. Her work is truly adorable and really feels like it's taking you right into the 70s through her use of color and imagery. She also runs her own online shop called Marisol Land and has collaborated with brands like ModCloth and Pleasing. That's Harry Styles' beauty brand. Keep on listening to hear Marisol talk about her relationship to Mexican culture, how she ended up quitting her day job after 13 years in the industry, and the pros and cons of collaborating with a huge brand. Okay, let's get into it. Welcome, Marisol, to Draws in Spanish. I am so happy to have you, and I was so pumped when you agreed to be on the show. So truly, thank you so much. How are you doing today? What's your vibe?
Oh my God. Well, thank you for having me on. I don't think I've done a podcast like this before, so that's very exciting.
I hope that's good.
Yeah, especially with, you're talking to artists. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm doing good.
Perfect. I see your cat there. If anyone's watching on YouTube, you can catch Marisol's cat. Which is this one, Omega? Or no, not Omega. Am I making that up?
Yeah, you're making up names.
I'm making that up. I have like my notes and that's not what's written in my notes. Okay.
This is Bonnie.
Okay.
Bonnie is like there's Bonnie and Clyde. They both look the same, but Bonnie is like the sweeter one. She kind of just like wants to be like around me at all times.
And don't you have one that's like really fluffy?
Yeah. So that's Clyde. She's not shaved. I don't know.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Too much research has led me to makeup names. Okay. So Clyde's hiding.
Yeah, she's hiding. She's kind of like the like, I guess, the more dominant cat. So she likes to be up top somewhere by herself, or like she'll be like sunbathing somewhere by herself. But she also gets cuddly sometimes
in private.
Yeah.
She's a private girl. Okay, so one of the first things I want to like start talking to you about was just like give us a little context as to where you were born and raised. I like to ask this question. You've probably heard it before if you've listened to any episodes, just to give a little bit more cultural context, because the U.S. is like so big.
Yeah. Well, I'm from Los Angeles County. I was pretty much raised in Downey, so it's like this little suburb town known for like the oldest standing McDonald's.
Oh.
I don't know if you've seen that, but it's really cool. It's like, I think it's like old, like Googie architecture, but it has like the big M's, really like cool. And they have like a little museum inside. It's really awesome.
Okay. So the biggest thing your hometown was known for was having the oldest McDonald's.
Yeah. Oldest McDonald's. And I think also, the Carpenters are from there.
That's cute.
Yeah. So there's like the Carpenter house there, and there's other things that it's known for. But
you're like looking in the air, like vaguely, like I think there's something else.
Yeah.
Someone's gonna DM you after when they listen. They're like, oh, you forgot about this, and this. One of the things that I noticed while I was researching so much about you, I noticed, I know that you're Mexican American, but it was actually kind of hard for me to confirm that online.
Oh,
like I was like, I'm almost positive, but like I am making a slight assumption by reaching out, right? And I was like Googling, I was like, I'm going to reach out, and then you confirmed, and I was like, okay, it's all good. But is there any reason why that's like hard to confirm? Do you not often share that for any particular reason, or was it accidental?
I feel like it's pretty obvious in my name. Like, I feel like I have like the most like Mexican name. And I don't know. I feel like Marisol is kind of equivalent to being named like Maria or something like that. So,
I feel you. Yeah. That's what I figured. But I'm also like, just curious because for a long time, like my name is Fabiola. So I'm like, people, it's obvious. Like, but, for me, I am from Chile. So it's not that part is not always obvious, right? So like nationality is not always obvious, especially given that I'm so white. So I was just wondering if how you feel about like proudly calling yourself Mexican American. Like, how do you identify with that term?
I feel like growing up, I was very much like in my child brain, I was like, I'm Mexican. Like that's that's my identity. So like growing up, you have to get dressed up for Halloween for school. And I remember my mom dressed me up one day because she didn't have a chance to make me a costume or whatever. And she put on this like American t-shirt on me. And she was like, you're an American for Halloween. And I was like, I was so confused. Like I didn't understand.
That is so confusing. She like messed your entire identity up.
Yeah.
At that moment, were you confused because you felt like you were American already? Or like, what was the battle?
It was confusing because it's like, to be told that you're as a costume, you're wearing like this American identity as an American flag with the bald eagle on a t-shirt. And I don't know.
She was just slacking.
Yeah. And then, from that, it made me question so much where I'm like, what does this really mean? And like, am I an American or like what? I don't know.
Like
and
your relationship with quote being American got even more confusing because before that you felt only Mexican, or did you always think you were also American?
No, I felt like I was basically just Mexican because it's like when you
grew up in.
Yeah, that's what you're surrounded in. Mm-hmm. Like your whole culture is Mexican, and then you also try to blend in with like your American peers by like seeing how other kids are with their families, and you watch on TV like what an American household is. And what are white families like the way they live?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I remember talking to a friend and, because I grew up in Downey, it was like very much like the point where I was in school, it was like there was a larger population of white people. And then, but it was also like the Latino people were being more like mixed in there now. And now it's like Downey is like very Latino. Like if you tell anybody about Downey, they're like, they think it's all Latino people. But when I was growing up, there was like a lot more white people. So when I would go to their houses and I'd see how they live, I'd be like, wow, it's like watching like an American family on the TV. So it's like a very much culture shock, right? And then I grew up in that, but like these two worlds, that exist.
Just sitting right between them. Yeah. I think that's really interesting because from my point of view, because I'm from South Florida, just for context, like California to me is like, the most the state with the most Mexican culture, right? So I would think like for you growing up there, oh, it must have been beautiful. You were surrounded by like all this Mexican representation. And in a way you were, right? Like insulated within your own home. But there was still back then like those glimpses of white culture that really like just are shocking. And I think that's hilarious because I think only it probably goes beyond Latino, but like immigrant kids have that experience of like, my house is not what's on TV, and like what we're doing is not what's on TV, and you can't just like go over to your friend's house for the night or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like I think it's so funny that like a kid having to think about that and just being like, what? Because the parents like understand exactly what's happening, but you don't. It's so confusing.
Yeah. And then like, even then, like, I feel like my parents, it's like, it's still very much like, they still mostly speak Spanish, and they are Americanized because they have lived here since like, I don't know, since like the 80s, late 80s. And but they're still very much stuck kind of like in their culture, you know?
Like a little bit more traditional?
Yeah, very traditional. So like my brother just moved in with his girlfriend. And my mom was so upset. She called me up and she's like, can you believe your brother moved in with his girlfriend without getting married? And I was like, what are you even talking about? Like, how is that even the thing in your brain right now? Like,
like, what? Like, you didn't know that was going to be an issue for her?
Because that's like the normal thing that Americans do. It's like a thing like where you live with your partner first before you decide to get married or whatever, you know? But in her culture, like it's also to just even leave the home, your family home is like a big thing. So like I left home like when I was 22, and it was kind of an emotional thing because I was the first one to move out of my household.
Oh, okay.
And I know that for them, they probably wanted me to like get married before I moved out. But we grew up poor, so it was like my mom understood that like I need to leave the household to like have my own space and like grow as a person. And so it was kind of like she wasn't like, they didn't hate me about it or anything like that, but it was still like,
it was still breaking the norm.
Yeah, very much so. So like even now, like my brother is like a couple years younger than me, but she's still like in shock. Like she's still like, I can't believe him. Like she's just so mad. And I'm like, what is going on?
And I can't even imagine what she thinks of his girlfriend daring to partake in this, right?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Scarlet letter on her for sure.
Yeah. And then it makes me think like she probably thinks I'm like this crazy person living by myself and like paying rent by myself, or I don't know. Like my parents also never got married, so they've like been living in sin, you know,
for eternity. Yeah. I mean, I really think like I think like parents are weird. In my experience, it's been like, yeah, they think one way, like how your mom thinks like you should get married before you move in together. But then it's not really in practice, right? Because like your parents, you know, are technically living in sin. And like you moved out and that was okay. So like they can rationalize certain things and make it work. But there is still this like deeply ingrained tradition that they're like fighting against all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And it's always like they kind of have to like pick and choose like what they want to be upset about. I don't know.
Right. And they're like, I'm sure something else will come along and your brother's like living situation will be, you know, we'll move past that.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just, you know, I don't know. I think it's like I think my parents understand that like they chose to be in this foreign country and like it comes with like different social norms or whatever. And they kind of, they're like more accepting these days, but still it's like you said, it's very much ingrained inside of their, like the way they were raised. that they fight against that, you know, all the time.
Right. So how do you feel like, since you grew up here, you were born here, do you feel like Americanized too much? Do you feel like, how do you feel about being connected to Mexican culture, given that you are, you know, in a way so Americanized, and you know, moved out, and, you know, you're breaking so many of the Mexican cultural norms?
Yeah. I feel like, it's really, it's difficult to say, because, I feel like, you know, I was raised in my whole Mexican culture, but I feel like growing up, you know, when you become a teenager and you start like figuring out like who you are as a person, I feel like I kind of just like, I don't know, became my own, like I kind of like not separated myself from the culture, but it's just like I just followed like whatever made me happy. And like,
regardless if that was like Mexican enough or American enough for, like, Mexican enough for your parents and American enough for society, I suppose.
Yeah. And I don't know. And then, like, you know, going back to how you couldn't figure out if I was really like Mexican or whatever. I always feel like that it's kind of like this like, for me, it's like this weird thing where I don't want people to, I don't know, I have a hard time talking about myself. And I feel like, I rather people know me for my work, like the work that I'm putting out, than like, I don't know, like my whole background story or something. Like, I don't, like, I feel like, you know,
I get that, because sometimes for me, it's like, if I identify as Latina, do you imagine that I have like, I don't know, a rosary and like flower crowns and
exactly
like fitting into like tokenizing yourself?
Yes. Yeah. And that's pretty much what I feel is why, is because like, I don't want people to put this like this judgment on me, and not really look at my work the way it should be, without like all these other background things attached to it, you know? Yeah. And I feel like being a Latina, there's like so much, there's so many stereotypes around that. And, I feel like I'm a very, I don't know, like I have like a very colorful world, and I don't, you know, I don't know. I feel like there's like a lot of like different stereotypes that like, isn't it? You see my cat?
Cat just crossed the camera. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. No, but I totally get what you mean. Like, you know, by outwardly labeling, because, you know, from what I'm hearing, like you feel, Mexican enough, right? Like, would you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. 100%. Like,
but like you're not trying to, but you feel a little bit maybe awkward about putting that label on yourself. And
yeah, I think labels is like a very difficult thing. Like I honestly, I don't like labels. Like I don't want, like even when people want me to describe my work, like that's another thing I have a hard time talking about, because it's like, you know, like people always ask me for anything. It's like, oh, what kind of art are you making? And it's always very difficult, because I have to put a label on it, or else people don't understand like where I'm like, at least the gist of like
people
what
need
I'm
to
doing.
Like place it somewhere. Like,
yeah,
an art director needs to know where you go, essentially. So, but it's tough because you want to essentially go beyond labels, right? And be a little bit of everything.
Yeah. And I kind of want to have the freedom to do whatever I want to do. Like, I don't want a label on something.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of people that feel that way. I mean, for a really long time, I also felt that way. But for me, it stemmed from a place of not feeling, and I still struggle with this, like feeling Chilena enough. Like, given that I grew up here, like, you know, there's this like, am I hitting the mark of whatever that means? Like, I don't know. And so it felt weird to then identify with it. But now the way I'm thinking about it, which could be, you know, something interesting for you, is just like, I can own that label and make it whatever I want it to be, right? So me being as, quote, white passing, which is a very confusing term, but like as white and American as possible, having an American accent and like, not doing a lot of traditional Latina things can be Latina too, right? Like, because for a long time I felt like being Latina meant, especially in the US, Mexican culture, which is mostly represented, or like Cuban and Puerto Rican culture. And I was like, I don't really identify with that. Like, I don't identify with rice and beans and like, the stereotypes. And I felt like I needed to reject it. But now I'm embracing that I can make it my own. It doesn't mean I have to, I am wearing a red lip, but like, I don't have to,
Yeah.
Which is like sometimes what it feels like.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely like that. It's like, you're your own individual person. So it's like you can choose to not like any of those stereotypes or whatever. And like, I don't know. I just feel like as an individual person, like, I think we're more than just like whatever, like wherever we come from, like,
yeah,
I feel like we can be like, I remember for a while, I didn't really like avocados. And then people were like, oh my God, how could you not like avocados? You're Mexican. Like, well, what kind of Mexican are you? And I'm just like, what does that even mean?
Right. Yeah. I mean, the same could be, I think it just comes down to like breaking stereotypes.
Yeah.
And really, really rejecting a stereotype makes so much sense. And there are people who really do identify with those stereotypes. Not that that's like a bad thing, but then it's easy. It's an easier path. To go down. But I think one of the main reasons I created this podcast, for me, it was like, I'm not seeing enough Latina representation in general, but I also want to break the stereotype of what it means to be Latina, right? Like for me, I don't feel like, super whatever the stereotype of Latina is. I don't feel that way. So, and for a long time, that's why I rejected it. And now I'm like, oh, with this podcast, I can show like, Marisol, you can be Latina and not like avocados and not, like,
I like avocados now. Okay. I'm okay with avocados.
She has grown into avocados. So who knows what could be next for you? In a year, you could be extremely Latina stereotype. But I totally get what you mean. And I'm so glad we're having this conversation because it's not that it's rare. I guess it's rare to hear, but I think it's common to feel like for a lot of people, especially as they go through generations in the US.
Yeah. I mean, I think, being from here, I think it's like, it's definitely one of those things where it's like, you also can feel very much like you're not enough of wherever your parents come from, even though you grew up around that whole dynamic.
Are there any like specific culture shock things that you can remember were like surprising to you? I feel like everyone has like one thing where they were like, didn't know.
Oh my God. Well, I didn't know that like, I don't know if, I guess it's like a Southern thing, but like a lot of people have like during the summer, they have like lake houses or like these like, I don't know, places where people just go and vacation at.
Yes, that would be the rich Southern people. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
They can afford to like, they have like big, but I even think even if you're not that wealthy, depending on like how many generations you've been in the US, you may have bought property like, I don't know, in the woods or something. But lake houses, amazing.
Yeah. Like my ex had a lake house kind of farm situation. And I'm just like, oh my God, like what is like, it was like a movie thing, where I'm just like, oh, okay. And I even was at a bar and I was talking to somebody and they're like, oh yeah, like, doesn't matter where you're from or whatever, everybody goes to the lake or does like some sort of like, or know somebody with a lake house and you go there and that's how you spend your time.
It's a real thing. It's a real, I realized once I moved to like New York and was like, working with other people who came from money or had been here a long time, that it's like common. It's super common. But, growing up, I didn't know anyone that did that.
I didn't know anybody personally until my ex showed me that. And I was like, whoa, that's super cool. Like, okay.
Casual extra house.
Yeah. I'm like, wow, okay. But yeah, I've also taken him to like an actual like family party, and he's just like, okay, like I can tell he's like very overwhelmed. And then even just ordering for, there's usually a taco guy. So it's like, okay, how do I, like what?
He's like at Chipotle. He's like, what?
Yeah.
He's like, I want a bowl. Okay. I love that. Yeah, I think, I think something that's key that I think about in terms like a key differentiation is just having generational wealth, right? Like, because when you immigrate here and your family like you're starting, this is level 0, right? And other people are like at level 5 or 6 of being in the US, like generationally, they're in the 5th generation, a lot higher odds of having accrued a lake house than when you are just moved here, So I always think that's crazy. Just unfair, but
yeah, it's really crazy. But yeah, like I grew up poor. So we grew up in a 1-bedroom house, and like there was like literally like there was no boundaries in my house. There was like, we all just shared. We were just like all on top of each other. And that's very much like the culture that we live in, that I was brought up in. It's like, oh, okay, my aunt's coming from Mexico. Like, let's bring her in. And it's like, okay, we don't have any space, but that's fine. And like, it's just like, you may have like the smallest little house, but you use the heck out of that little house. And yeah, so like growing up, I didn't have a room or anything. So that was like my main goal. It's like, that was like my American dream. It's like, I'm gonna move out, and I'm gonna like have my own space, and I'm gonna decorate it however I want. And I feel like maybe that's why I don't know if maybe that was just in me, but I'm very much like, I like to surround myself with like things that are very inspiring. So
yes. Ooh, that definitely could be like a key connection, right? Like if you felt like before you had to share everything, now you have like precious things that are your own.
Yeah. And also it's like you get to decorate a space to be exactly how you want it. And I don't know, you like, I don't know if you have like a space in your home where it's like you get home and you just look at the space and you're just like, oh my God, like it's just so like cozy, and it just makes you feel really warm inside. And it's just like your own little like special place,
Yeah. I feel like personally I have areas like that, but I also don't feel, I think, as passionate about like decor, I guess, and design. Only to me, I get overwhelmed. Like I get overwhelmed by the choices. I'm like, okay, how stressful. and then owning it, and then I'm like, where do I put it? And what am I going to do with it? But I think I have some other traumas in the sense that I moved around a lot. So to me, like getting things,
right? You feel like you're going to have to get rid of it.
I have like I feel like a debt to it. Like, like it weighs heavy on me to have the items when they're like bigger than something I can put in my pocket or something, or in a backpack. But I adore your style and the world that you've created. And it's one of the main reasons I wanted to, talk to you. You've like gone beyond just illustration, right? Like you create your own world, but you also curate your own world in real life through fashion and just like objects and everything. And I'm so impressed by that, because like I said, to me, it feels very like overwhelming to think about. Where do you think your like fascination with 70s and 60s imagery and style and vibe like comes from? Okay, before we keep going with this amazing conversation, I just wanted to interrupt to let you know about something totally new I'm doing with this season of Draws in Spanish. This season, I decided to launch a Patreon. In case you don't know what Patreon is a way you can support creators and gain access to exclusive content. So on the new Draws in Spanish Patreon, you can access exclusive rewards like joining our Discord community, listening to extended episodes, getting monthly prints and stickers mailed right to you. If you want to be a part of all of this and so much more, become a Patreon of Draws in Spanish by heading to patreon.com/drawsinspanish. That's patreon.com/drawsinspanish. Draws in Spanish. Thank you, and I'll see you over there.
I think it's just like the way I really am drawn to color. And I feel like the 60s and 70s was a very colorful time. Like they were not afraid of like, the 70s, everything was really big and like very grand. And like the 60s was like, very experimental. And they pretty much just went like crazy. And like there's so many different designs that came out, like so many concepts and ideas, like everybody just like throwing things out there. It was like, yeah, it's just like a very inspiring time, I think, for me. And as somebody who loves working with color, like, I don't know if you look at the fashions, I mean, you can get, there's two different worlds, I guess. There's kind of the more muted 60s, and then there's like the very colorful and, like the 70s, like the Brady Bunch or whatever,
right.
Like, very colorful and extravagant and just like a big, like, I don't know, like, wow,
Yeah. I think I remember reading somewhere like that in the 60s or the 70s was like a time where they were like fabricating all types of new materials. So I think that contributed to experimentation, right? And why we got like funky designs. And now we're like in an efficiency, like fabrication mindset. So everything's kind of like the same because it's for Amazon. Because it's like faster for Amazon to do that.
Yeah.
So I bet it has something to do with that reason that era is like so, just cool and different. Did you happen to see that study that came out? I don't know who did it, so I'll leave it linked somewhere, but like about how the world is getting less colorful.
I've been, so I'm like really obsessed with TikTok right now. And there was a TikTok where somebody was talking about how there's like less color in the world or something. And I was like, what? I was like, that, but
you
like
are single-handedly combating that.
Yeah,
for sure. For sure.
Yeah. And I don't like, I honestly, like, I understand why people just like very minimalist things. Like, like how you were saying, how it's very overwhelming. Like color can be very overwhelming because I feel like every color makes you feel something different. And I feel like maybe that's why people, want some sort of calmness. So you take away all this color. But
we're also like being hit by media all the time.
Right.
So maybe that also, I mean, there's so much like psychologically happening.
Yeah. Yeah. But, like I know that there's been this big white and grayish kind of trend that's been happening, especially like interior decorating or whatever. Like a lot of like everybody's painting their walls gray.
And like giving kids toys that have like no colors. They're just like neutrals.
Yeah, like to me that's crazy. Okay, like because I remember I don't know where I got this piece of information, but it was like in prisons they don't put any color on the wall, so it's basically like gray or white because they don't want the inmates to have any sort of joy or any sort of like pleasure in color,
Yeah, and they want it to feel bleak.
Yeah, and it's like, why are people painting their houses prison colors, So it's like, what is going on? But, it's just when a trend happens, and like everybody just latches on to that. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I totally feel you. I think it's definitely like in trend I wanted to ask you, like, this is just my interpretation, so I could be wrong, but like, I feel like there's only so much 70s references that you can find these days, right? Like, because it already happened and it maybe is not super well archived. How do you keep like finding new 70s inspiration or 60s inspiration for your work, given that you're dealing with like a very specific era?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the 60s and 70s is such a vast world.
Yeah.
So I'm always finding just new inspiration. I used to go to flea markets like all the time, and I used to go thrifting a ton. And I'm the type of person that like takes photos, takes a lot of notes. any little thing that like I find inspiring, or even just a phrase that I have in my mind, like I'm writing it down. But even like, I don't know, like stuff that I've seen, like maybe a couple months ago, I'll look at it again and then I'll get like a whole different idea from it, you know?
Yes. I totally get what you mean. You are really posting a lot and sharing a lot of illustrations all the time. And even like with your shop, Marisol Land, like you have a lot of prints available. So I'm just curious, like, what is your creative process for like that much output? I'm really impressed, and I'm just curious, like, how you're managing like to take these sources of inspiration and then remix like new imagery.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess I am kind of crazy in a way where I feel like I am putting out a lot of work. And honestly, it has to do a lot with, I think because of Instagram. Instagram is the reason I am here, you know, like doing what I'm doing, because without Instagram, I wouldn't have known I can even become an artist. Like I wouldn't have known anybody would want to pay me for like creative anything, you know?
Yes, I think that's beautiful. Like, you know, everyone hates on Instagram, and I get it. You know, there's a lot of negative parts to it. But like you're saying, like it made you realize that not only do people like your work, they're willing to pay you for your work. And other people have done similar things with their work.
Yeah. Like I grew up with Mexican parents that they're not like art people. Like they're very much like factory worker kind of people. Like they just clock in, clock out. Like their main thing is like, I got to have a job, you know, like that somebody that gives me a check, and that's what I need to survive. So like even going to college, like I went to fashion school, and my dad was very much like, you're not going to be a nurse. Like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, a nurse? Like how? I never even pretend operated on like anybody or anyone.
Like, did you read the cues? Like I did. Were you watching? Because I never did that.
Yeah. And I also, I put it together later, but I noticed a lot of like Latino women become nurses or or join like some sort of healthcare route.
Caretaking route.
Yeah. Because it's more of a higher paying, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that's where that came from. But like, I remember telling my mom that I wanted to be a fashion designer. But my first thing that I really wish I could have done was if I could be an artist. But to me, that was like something you just see, like that's somebody else's thing. Like that that's can't just like do.
A myth.
Yeah, pretty much. Like it's like a white people thing, you know, like they can do this because they have probably connections, or I don't know, like they're born into an artistic family and they got connections, you know, like
or they have the money to sit and experiment with their paintings for years.
Yeah, exactly. And like, yeah, my mom was like, she's less, I guess discouraging, but she was very much like, you know, fashion design is very competitive, and like, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be trying to get your job, and and she's like, it's going to be very hard. And I'm like, I know all these things, but I believed in myself where I'm like, I'm such a creative person. Like, I feel crazy not to do this thing, you know, like, I don't know what else I would be doing.
I think it's so like strange and like just curious, like curioso that you can totally believe in yourself and like, I can do fashion design. Like I can, but you didn't have that feeling enough towards like being an artist. Like that was like too far, right? But like you limited yourself to fashion design, and you were like, oh, I can totally do that. And I 100% relate to that. But I know a lot of people have done similar things. I think that was the safer choice, kind of negotiating like what you could do. Yeah,
for sure. Because of fashion design, like I can work for a company and I know this trade. So I know how to design clothes. I know how to make patterns. I know how to make patterns for clothes. Like I can do all of that for a company. So I can clock in and clock out for a company. You know, there's so many fashion brands out there. I can work for them. Like that was like my most, like like the job where I could see myself making a living off of, you know?
And like marrying the two realities of like, I want to be creative, but I also need stability.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I went through the whole fashion thing, and I worked in the industry for a long time. But because of Instagram, like I was on Instagram, like probably the very beginnings of Instagram. Like, I remember when I first got on Instagram, it wasn't because like I thought it was like some social thing where we would be sharing pictures to strangers. It was more of like, I wanted to find some cute filters for my photos. And like there was like 7 filters on there at the time.
Yeah.
I just wanted cute photos for myself. Like that was another thing. I like photography. So I wanted to, especially like, I think my first Instagram photo is of my cat Bonnie, and it's like,
aww, and you stayed true to that. All these years later. Yeah. For anyone listening, Instagram started in 2010, just to give a little context. Yeah.
Yeah. So at that time, I really just wanted cute filters for my just home photos or whatever, just for me. And then Instagram became this thing where it's like more people joined. And then I started discovering artists, and I was like, oh my God, like these people are like kind of the same. They look the same age as me, and they're selling their artwork and people are buying it. And I'm like, whoa, like that just wasn't that just in my brain, like just something that I knew that people could do. It wasn't like, it didn't happen until Instagram happened.
You know, like things didn't line up until Instagram was on the scene. So I know you were in fashion, I think I read somewhere like 13 years.
Yeah, it was 12 years.
Okay. So that's a really long time. So what kind of made you, decide to take that leap? Because it sounds to me like maybe it took a while from even learning about it on Instagram that people could make a living off of it.
I've always kind of made art on the side, but it was just for me. Like it was kind of a therapeutic kind of thing, like I was feeling very overwhelmed, and I would just draw, and I draw whatever, and so it was because it was like a therapeutic thing. I felt very naked about sharing my work, and even just to my friend, I'd be like, no, don't look at that. Like, don't open that, just leave it alone. And so I didn't share my work on Instagram until like later, like years later. And so I don't know if you've gone back through my whole Instagram life, but
I've gone pretty far back. Okay. I don't know if all the way back, but pretty far.
Okay. Yeah. So it was basically me just sharing like the things that I like. So like the cute things I'd collect, the outfits I would style.
Very early lifestyle influencer, if I may say, right? Like before that, what had an official term, right?
Yes.
Just like sharing about you and your life, and with a very specific taste.
Yes. So it was a lot of that lifestyle thing. It's just like things that I really liked, and I really like just thought were very inspiring and cute. Like that's what I would share online. And from that, people really started following me. And I thought that was really cool. Like to me, it was like, oh, I got 1,000 followers. That's so crazy. Like I don't even have 1,000 friends, like it's just like, who are these people? But like from there, I realized that people really liked my style. So I liked my style, but not everybody's going to like it. So I never really thought anybody was going to be into it like me, but people really liked my, so this, like the aesthetic term is like something that I learned through social media too. Is like, oh my God, your aesthetic is so blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, I don't even know what that is. So I had to look up what that even was. And like,
well, what was it? Now I'm curious.
Aesthetic?
Oh, the word aesthetic itself.
Yeah, the word aesthetic itself.
Oh my gosh. I thought there was like a type of aesthetic you were talking about specifically.
No.
Just the term. Yeah, because now on the internet, people use that word
for everything
freely. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was like when people are like, oh my God, your aesthetic is so this and that. And I'm just like, what? Because I was sharing just
You're
stuff.
like, this is just what I like.
Yeah. I was just sharing stuff that I like. And then, what was the other term? Oh yeah. People kept calling me a brand. And people are like, oh my God, this is so on brand. And I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, then it's like, it's like social media became like this thing where it's like everybody's a brand.
Yes.
Like everybody is like, I don't know, like you're
everyone's like, representing themselves.
Yeah. But it's also like, you're kind of stuck in this brand, you know, like, oh, like when I would wear a black outfit, like nobody would like it, you know?
Off-brand.
Very off-brand, you know? People are like, oh my God, like, do you even wear black? And I'm like, yes, I do. But honestly, whenever I would share it, nobody would care. So
you guys don't care.
Yeah. So it's like, but it's
because you built an audience on the colorful 70s brand. And so when you go off-brand, that audience isn't going to engage.
Right.
Which is annoying.
Yeah. And so that also going back to me just sharing my lifestyle stuff. So I would throw in little like little illustrations that I would do, and nobody really cared about it, but I really liked it. And I was like, you know what? Like I think it goes really well with my whole brand. So I'm just going to keep like sharing my little bits of like art that I put in there, you know, because I want people to know that I can put cute outfits together, and I can, I don't know, have a very cute home, but I can also draw. And like, I also have all these other talents. And then like I made this top, and people are like,
Beautiful.
oh my God, you can sew. And I was like, yeah,
because you're a fashion girly.
Yeah. Like
I mean that in a positive way. I use the term ironically, but it's positive.
Yeah. Like
it's amazing. Yeah. Like you're more than just like, you know, your vision. You have actual talents that you want to showcase.
Yeah. And I don't think people knew that I'm a fashion designer on that's my main thing. And for a long time, people are like, what do you even do for a living? You know, but I also kept that separate because in the corporate fashion world, it's not very creative. And it's not very and also I wasn't very proud of where I was working, because most of the jobs in fashion are all fast fashion kind of jobs.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I was able to quit that.
How did you decide to do that? Because I think a lot of people listening can be in a similar position where they're at a job they don't care for. Yeah. Because they have to pay the bills, and they dream of being able to like take their art career and make that their primary thing. So how did you decide to do that?
Yeah. So like I said, like I would throw in little bits of my artwork, and just because I wanted to show people more of like what talents that I can bring to the table that aren't just a beautiful photo or whatever. Nobody really cared about it in the beginning, and it was fine because it's like still like Instagram wasn't the way that I made my money. So it was just like, I'm just doing this, you know, like
low pressure.
I was working towards figuring out how I can make this my job, or like how I can eventually quit my job. Like my main goal was to quit my job. So like the job that I've had it for 12 years, and 2 years in, like I wanted to quit so bad. Like I was just like, I hated it so much because like I said, I wasn't very proud of it. Like I worked there 12 years, which is way too long. But it also comes with the fear of like being poor. So it's like giving up that safety net. What I did in those years is that I continue to do Instagram stuff. Like I would sometimes even be late for work just because like I had to make sure I take a photo of my outfit, you know. I would do that before work, and then I do my art after work. So I was just like, I was working so much, but I was working towards my goal of like quitting my job. And so I pushed myself to really like save an X amount of money that I felt comfortable with, that I can quit. And also like eventually people really liked my work, like a lot, where I'm like really blown away with the support from people.
Yes, yes. You've definitely been able to carve out a name for yourself.
Yeah.
And even though like maybe it took longer than you wanted it to, or you didn't commit to it, maybe you could have committed to it faster, but you didn't know at the time, right?
Yeah.
You've definitely made a huge name for yourself. I wanted to talk about actually one of your collections, but maybe I'll let you finish first, like how you finally left, you know?
Yeah.
But I think that's amazing.
Yeah. When I finally left, it was because I had already, like I had given myself like, okay, once I get 20,000 followers, I'll quit my job. And then that happened. And I'm like, no, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. And like, okay, once like I hit maybe 60,000, I'll do it, you know?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, no, like, I don't know, like it's so scary. And
it is scary.
So yeah, so I made sure I had like a certain amount of money saved up because I know, you know, this is like starting my own business, like, you know, figuring out how to even freelance, like that's a whole different thing. It's like, you know, it's a whole new career. So, that is like very scary, but I'm like, you know, I'm never going to get there unless I just dive in and I'm just make all the mistakes because I'm like one of those people that like, I guess it's kind of like a perfectionist personality where like, I want everything. I want to know everything exactly how it's going to happen before I even commit to this thing. And like,
which is like impossible.
Yeah.
It's just like a control issue. I have the same.
Yeah.
I speak from myself, but I feel the same way.
Yeah. I just feel because like I've been taken advantage and like it still happens. Like you get taken advantage of because you're not educated in whatever thing. And like, I always want to make sure that nobody's going to do this to me or nobody's going to like, I don't know. I'm just like very much like, I want to protect myself in any way that I can. So I want to make sure I have all these things in place so that I am ready, you know, and like I'm already in my 30s. So I'm like, there's no way I'm going to be more ready than now. And like, I just got to fucking do it. Like, oh, sorry. I don't know if, can we cuss on here?
It's fine. Okay. Yeah, it's fine. It's a show.
Okay. But yeah, so like, thankfully, yeah, when I finally quit quit my job, it was really crazy because they were very much in shock and they begged me to stay on. Thankfully that month that I quit, which I believe was like October, like officially I was done with them like in October of 2020. Thankfully I had like a really successful like month where I was like very overwhelmed with orders and all that. And I was like, oh my God, like I'm so glad like I'm here, you know? And, then that's when like all these other collaborations started rolling in. And I feel like, I don't know if the universe just knew that like I had quit my job and like I'm like out there in the world as an illustrator now and like opportunities were coming to me. And I was just like, oh my God, like this is like amazing. Like it just seems like out of a dream.
I think a lot of the times it's like we're so scared to take the leap that then once we finally do it, you kind of come out guns blazing, right? You're like, I'm ready, I'm going, because it's all risk. Like there's no failure is not an option essentially, right? Like you're on your own, you have to make it. And that like compels you to put yourself out there even more. And people notice that and brands notice that and art directors who are hiring notice that and the stars start like aligning. But I think a lot of it is just like your newfound commitment, right? Like, and your newfound confidence and being like, owning that you're an illustrator, owning that you're a brand finally, like owning all of these things that help put you out there. And I know you landed your collaboration. The one I want to talk, I know you have one with ModCloth, and I know you have one with Pleasing, which is Harry Styles' beauty brand. I wanted to talk about that one because it's more recent. But you collaborated with Pleasing for their Shroom Bloom. Shroom Bloom collection, and it's beautiful. There are so many assets involved. I think you only posted one Instagram post about it, but there are a lot of assets involved in the actual packaging, the packaging and in the imagery for the collection. So I'm just like, tell me about it and how did it feel to go from to like get that essentially?
It's pretty wild. I don't know. It's also like how do I say it? It's a very like crazy thing. Like to say like I did Pleasing's Shroom Bloom collection, like the art for it, like it just seems like it's not real. But when they first approached me, like Pleasing wasn't even like a brand that was out yet. Right. So like I didn't, and like I didn't, and I'm not like a huge like Harry Styles like fanatic. Like I like his music and I think he's super cute and adorable and he's very like a lovable character, you know? But like I don't follow him like his celebrity stuff, right. You know? Like I don't know anything about his personal life. So when they approached me about making the artwork for it, I've never heard of Pleasing. So I was like trying to Google what Pleasing was and like nothing would come up, but I saw like a photo of Harry Styles wearing some Pleasing thing. But also I was like, I don't know if this is his brand. Like I was not ready for the fandom to like come and like be all up in my world, you know?
Yeah, I feel, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the fandom is very supportive of your work now.
Yes. They're very intense people, but they're very, very sweet. They're very like, they just want to spread love, you know? But the part that I don't like about that is that because it's like this Pleasing is such a big brand and Harry Styles is like this
superstar.
Yeah, he's like a superstar. So many like, I guess, I don't know what you call these brands, but they're like pirate brands.
Yeah.
That like latch onto like
just knockoff brands.
Yeah, like they latch onto anything. So there's been like way more people knocking me off. So it's like they'll knock off the Pleasing artwork and then they'll mesh together my artwork, you know, because the Pleasing artwork is very much like my vibe. Like that's like my whole world.
It's your artwork. Yeah, it's your world for sure.
Yeah. And like and it went perfectly with the whole collection and everything. And so I feel like it's like people take my personal work and the Pleasing work and it's like all over everything. And it's like hard to.
It's kind of sloppy.
Yeah, it's like all over the place. So that's like another thing that wasn't cool about it.
I think that tends to happen though, the more your artwork is out there on the internet, the more likely you are to just get ripped off.
Yes.
It's almost inevitable in from my point of view.
Yeah, for sure. And and also it's like, because it's like this whole fandom that knows nothing about you. And also there's people that are just there like because they love Harry Styles so much. And some people aren't really like art followers, I guess, or like, you know anything about the art world. And I would get messages from people that like, oh, I never really cared much for art, but your art like made me like, I never got into art until I saw your work. And I was just like, whoa, that's really weird, but that's awesome that like I exposed people to this like, I don't know, really fun style of illustration, and they like really it really resonates with them.
Yeah, I think that just goes to show like the power of working in collaborating with like such a big name, right? Yeah. Like there are people, obviously you had already a dedicated following before this, that people who just care for your work, but now you exposed your work to a bunch of other people who like Harry Styles and Harry Styles as a brand. So there's some mutual benefit there.
Yeah. And from that, it's like, I also feel a bit of like, I need to educate like these group of people that don't understand the etiquette of like sharing people's work, or like, don't get like, just don't like, one thing that I notice is that people think that because they buy a print from my store, that they can then pay somebody to like customize, I don't know, like a laptop cover with that art on it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like they think like, oh, I've supported the artist in this way, so now I can put it and print it on these.
You have permission for everything.
Yeah. Or like they have permission to like put.
Which they can't. That's theft.
Yeah, exactly. Like I feel like I don't like talking about like art theft because it's very awkward for me. Like, yeah. I feel like I'm a person that like believes a lot about energy. and like the energy you put out into the world comes back to you. And like I'm very like hesitant about talking about people copy my work, because I feel like the more I talk about it, the more it's going to happen to me.
Yeah, I think that there is just a part of it that's like so far out of your control that it's hard to even address.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's like how to address it productively feels almost impossible. My perspective these days is like, someone, Marisol, can try and rip you off, but they don't have your next idea.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know your next collaboration. Like, you know, they're always going to be a step behind you.
Mm-hmm.
That's the nature of copying. Like, so, you know, it's like, how much energy do you want to spend on that?
Mm-hmm.
But it does like really just cheapen what you're doing.
Yeah. And especially when people are like, or send me like a cell phone cover, and they're like, oh my God, this is so cute. Did you collab with them? And it's like really ugly. And I'm like,
yeah,
no,
you're like, no,
I hate it.
Would you say it's still worthwhile to share your work, or are you feeling like you want to not share anything ever again?
I think it's definitely still worth it. I feel satisfaction and I feel good about like sharing what I'm making, and I'm proud of what I'm making. And I like knowing that it makes people feel happy, or like makes somebody's day better. Like I get so many messages from people that are just like, don't even want to say much, but other than like, keep doing what you're doing. You're like doing an amazing job. Like just random strangers, or I'm like, even like on hard days, like I love opening up my messages and just seeing some nice messages like that, because it's like, it is hard working for yourself and being freelance and owning your own business. And it's just like being an artist, and it's very overwhelming. So it's some days it's like you're very defeated and you're just like, I never want to like share anything again. But at the end of the day, like this is what I love to do. And I don't want to let like those negative things like take away the things that I like to do. But yeah, I'm still very happy to be doing what I'm doing. And I'm still very new to this whole like world. So, I'm still learning a lot, and I'm still like right now I'm trying to balance my social life and my like business art life.
Yeah, because it is a lot of work to work for yourself. Like you have to do the art and the business and the shop and the social, and you're wearing a million different hats. And I think I've had a lot of artists say the same thing on the show. It's just like, it's a lot of work. So, but unless you love it, like if you don't love it, you wouldn't do it, but clearly you love it and it's like worth the effort, which is just like a tricky realization. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's pretty much like who I am. And that's like, I feel like it's a lot of like, I think because I worked so long in a field that wasn't fulfilling, like I work extra hard in this and in pursuing my dream. So,
which is fulfilling.
Yeah, very fulfilling, but yeah, I'm still working through how to have a social life and like do all of this,
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe we'll have to do a part 2 sometime with your update and like in like a year when you have it all figured out.
Yeah, just a year.
Just a year. Marisol, how can listeners support your work? That's my last question, just so that everyone who falls in love with you throughout this episode knows where to find you and how to support you.
I think like the easiest way is just through Instagram. So it's just, it's my first and last name. So Marisol Muro. And through there, you can find my shop. And if you want to buy prints and stickers or like merchandise.
Official merchandise.
And right now I have, so like my next thing that I want to do is I eventually want to have my clothing line with like my own prints and everything. So, right now in my shop, I have tights that I illustrated the artwork for. And I don't know if people know, but I'm like, I love tights a lot. Like tights is like a big like styling tool that I use in a lot of my outfits. So my main priority was to come out with like my own tights, and I finally did that. So you can find that in my shop. And hopefully by next year, I'll be able to have like cut and sew garments.
Ooh, I mean, you have so much experience. It only makes sense for you to like explore that for yourself, given it's such a big interest for you.
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of experience in that. So that's definitely something that I want to get into in the future.
Marisol, thank you so much for sharing your story and your perspective and your highs and your lows with me here on the show. I can't tell you how much it means to me. And I'm just so excited to see where your career goes. I know that you're going to do even more amazing things. So thank you so much for sharing your time with me.
Thank you so much. And I'm very happy to be talking to you about all this. I don't think anybody's ever wanted to ask me this type of stuff. So I'm really happy to have this conversation with you.
Yes. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. All right, everyone. That's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Mexican-American artist Marisol Muro. Be sure to follow her work on Instagram at Marisol Muro, or click the link in the show notes to find her work on every other social platform. Now, before you go, I have to remind you to please subscribe to Draws in Spanish if you like this episode. Subscribing is free and really helps me out and helps me keep making the show for you. Now, if you want to connect with other Latinx artists in our Draws in Spanish community, head over to my Patreon for the show so you can join our Discord channel and access a ton of other perks. That's all for now. Hasta la próxima, amigos. Nos vemos el próximo martes. See you next Tuesday. Bye, guys.